I haven't written in a while, and that might be due to the events of 2025. When I say the events of 2025, it sounds as though they've directly affected me. My initial response is that they haven't. However, my psyche has been severely affected due to the implications of what has happened this year. And honestly, it's but a continuation of the events from the fall and winter months of 2024, where we might have elected our last president as we've known one for the last 100 years. Sorry to bury the lead to my future self, or whoever ends up reading or listening to this, if anyone. In no uncertain terms, Donald Trump was elected president for a second term in November of 2024. Since his inauguration, he has ushered in the true beginnings of an authoritarian state takeover, funded by the technocrats and the oligarch class. We are transitioning to some form of kleptocracy, plutocracy, although I don't quite understand the distinction, so I had to pause my writing to look up the definitions. I used AI to hurry things along, but here is a basic summary of the definitions as given by AI. Oligarchy, in the most general terms, is referring to the rule by a small group. One could argue we were already living in an oligarchy. Plutocracy is a specific type of oligarchy, where the wealth is the basis of the ruling group's power. Kleptocracy describes a government where the primary purpose of those in power is to steal from the state and its citizens, regardless of whether they were wealthy beforehand or if they were a small group. Kleptocracy often operates as an oligarchy, but not all oligarchies are kleptocracies. Based on the current situation in the US, there are a number of factions basically vying for power that could ultimately be described as a combination or abomination of the above three forms of rule. The US has rapidly begun to undo its liberal freedoms, as our president has stood up to the courts repeatedly in the first 100 days, dismissing their rulings. And yet, governing bodies, nor the people, have really risen to fight the conflagration of our core liberal values, one being the rule of law, and another being the separation of powers between the branches of government. Our Congress is seemingly and completely captured by the maggots, a term I use as a blanket description for the political supporters of MAGA and their voters. MAGA being Make America Great Again movement. That's more for people in the future. If this movement is altered or changed, or history is rewritten, that is the term used for now. Who knows what it will morph into as we attempt our best to parallel the Orwellian fiction of 1984. For additional context, the MAGA movement is a nationalist movement. Although it's not nationalism like the 1930s per se, it's more of its own modern flavor and flair. There is a cynicism that permeates the movement, a cynicism that has very little love for any one aspect of the country we inhabit. Instead, it's more tied to the perceived winnings and losings of our leader, Mr. Donald Trump. It's a true cult of personality. Many of the followers are happy to personally win nothing for themselves, while at the same time gaining significant mental stimulation from the perception of wins by their leader. This makes total sense if you understand Donald Trump, for he is a fascist, but not an authoritarian fascist like those of the old, like Mussolini or Hitler, or even the communist counterparts Mao or Stalin. All these men had deep national pride. They were true believers in the idea of some fictitious, idealistic country they had fabricated to their followers. Yes, their movements were about power. They were about consolidating power and exerting it over others. But they spoke with a true belief in some of what they were selling to the population. Donald Trump possesses none of these similarities. Everything he believes in, his main goals, are purely to enrich himself and his friends, or the sycophants he likes. And he likes sycophants. He is specifically self-serving, which has befuddled many political pundits and analysts to such a degree over the last decade that one must beg the question, is the US and the American population at large one of the most naive populations on the planet? How have we been conned into such terrible deals repeatedly? And How are we so susceptible to being conned? At what point does it cease to be ironic that the poor proletariat ardently defends the billionaire classes as that billionaire class pillages the system through legal means? Legal, of course, being that the laws were put in place by the wealthy so that the pillaging would be legal. My first and most prominent instinct is that the deeply rooted belief systems are tied inexorably to religious organizations, and they're one of the most fundamental culprits to our beguiled nature. One might say it's the lack of education. Yet how does that explain the highly educated elite class of detractors and critics of the maggots, who seem so continuously perplexed as to the motives and true ambitions of Donald Trump and his technocratic gang of elites, people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk? We now have evidence of Elon Musk supporting Nazi organizations in a myriad of European countries. He has performed Sig Heils publicly, multiple times, and shamelessly, although he did walk back and feigned subjugation after being called out. He has spread Nazi propaganda and white nationalist talking points on his own social media platform, and yet the public is still debating or hesitant to call the technocrat a Nazi. Peter Thiel, on the other hand, has written articles, books, and sponsored magazines that speak of a type of complete undoing of the American liberal republic we inhabit. His goal is to transform it into some type of technocratic regional monarchy based on the sophomoric libertarian principles and the writings of Curtis Yarvin. The summation being something along the lines of each company inhabiting a region being treated as its own miniature government or monarchy, where the CEO is treated like a king and his vassals work within the rubric put forth by that mini state. It's also not surprising that these men have ideas about who has voting rights and is afforded liberal freedoms within these little kingdoms. Spoiler, it's white landowning males. And Peter Thiel has been grooming J.D. Vance to carry out this vision and his will. It is 2025, and I fear the years we are entering will be rife with blood, war, and subjugation. They already are. But this will be a true exploitative elite cycle that is historical, it is cyclical, and it typically ends or leads to large global and or internal conflicts and bloody messes. As we look at the globe, most humans once again fall under some form of authoritarian control, and I'm left with questions that can only be answered beyond the philosophical through collective action and collaboration. How do we change our trajectory? How do I navigate this landscape in a way that protects my children? How do I ensure they aren't captured by some of these dangerous ideologies, which can so easily and readily appeal to the youthful and undeveloped mind? How do I prevent my sons from serving in an almost certainly inevitable conflicts that are looming on the horizon? I'm left with hows.